I'm going to read from my novel, Devil and the Detective. And I'm going to begin at the beginning and just read about a page or two, just to situate things so I don't have to explain anything. And then I'll skip ahead and read like 3 or 4 pages. Too short. So I'll start. Crime is law. Law is crime. That much is obvious. Interpret it however you like, but it still holds. Enough abstraction. Time for the case. The phone call came in the late evening, and the woman on the other end of the line was crying. "Mr. James," she said. "Yes," I said. "I need your help," she said. "My husband, he's been murdered." "How did you get my number?" "Martin Bouvert, my lawyer, he gave it to me." She started weeping. "Mr. James, please, I need your help. He's been stabbed in the chest. Gerald's been stabbed in the chest." "Calm down, ma'am. I don't even know your name." "Elaine," she said. "Elaine Andrews." Although it was late, I was awake, or somewhat awake. I'd been reading a book on the couch while drinking whiskeys. I was tired and groggy, but still awake. "Have you called the police, Mrs. Andrews?" "Where's your husband?" "Yes, I've called the police, and my husband's in the living room with a knife in his chest. He's soaked in blood." "When did you find him?" "Just now, when I woke up. When I saw he wasn't in bed, I called out to him and there wasn't an answer, so I went to go look for him, and when I found him, he was downstairs in the living room, laid out on the couch with a knife in his chest." "Where do you live?" "Tower Street, 19 Tower Street. Please, come soon." "I will, Mrs. Andrews. But I'd like to ask you one more question." "Yes?" "Why have you asked me to come so quickly? I mean, you haven't even talked to the police, or at least they haven't shown up at your home yet, so why call me immediately?" "I called the police first, and then my lawyer, and he told me to call a private detective. He gave me your number. He said you'd be discreet." "Are there things we need to be discreet about?" "He just seemed to think it was a good idea." "That's the doorbell," she said. "Probably the police. Come soon, please." After she hung up her phone, I stood with mine still in my hand, listening to the dead line. I put the phone back on its mount and sat down on the couch and drank my drink. I wasn't sure why she was calling me a private detective before the police, although useless for anything other than exerting unnecessary force, even had a crack at the case. Something's fishy, I thought, without a doubt. Her lawyer was overly cautious, I thought, sitting on the couch, whiskey in hand, contemplating the case. The case of Mr. Gerald Andrews. Gerald Andrews, with his wife, Elaine Andrews, and a knife in his chest. Their names were so boring, so commonplace as to seem improbable. At the very least, I thought, groggy from the drink, Mr. Gerald Andrews' death, whether caused by murder or suicide or some freak accident, would bring considerable excitement to Mrs. Elaine Andrews' life. Elaine Andrews. Who is this woman, I wondered, while sitting on the couch, shortly after she called me, shortly after the expiration of her husband, Gerald Andrews. They both had old people's names, but Elaine Andrews' voice sounded young, or at least not old. Under 40, I suspected, but I'm often wrong when it comes to guessing people's ages, especially over the telephone. There are a lot of things I get wrong when it comes to guesswork. I observe, and then I come to a conclusion, if there's a conclusion to come to, which more often than not, there isn't. A lot remains unknown. Things change while you look at them. I better get dressed, I thought, sitting on the couch, so I finished my drink and took a shower. So that's the beginning, that's kind of the setup. And from there, that weren't such a bad idea after all. I called the florist, whose shop was just down the street, and asked if I were to go through with my order for $40 to 19 Tower Street, could I maybe get a lift with the delivery driver? She asked me where I live, and I told her, and then she said, "Okay, sure. He'll pick you up in 20 minutes. I prepaid over the phone with my Visa and asked for a receipt. While waiting, I brushed my teeth again and reapplied underarm deodorant and sprayed on a little eau de toilette, a gift from a former girlfriend, and I also put on a clean shirt, even though the other wasn't dirty, because I wanted to appear fresh, despite the hangover. The delivery driver will be here any minute, I thought, and I put on my coat and grabbed a notepad and pen, put them in my inside pocket, and I grabbed my keys, with a small penknife and small flashlight on the keychain. I drank 2 glasses of ice water. I wondered whether I was forgetting anything, then I grabbed my wallet. I grabbed my sunglasses too, remembering what a friend's uncle said to me once. Never leave home without your wallet, keys, and sunglasses. I looked at my watch and decided to wait out front for the flower delivery driver, since he was doing me a favor. The delivery driver showed up in a small black hatchback, and the back of the car was full of bouquets. The passenger side seat, too, had a large bouquet on it, but the driver, Darren, and made some space for it in the back. Darren was tall and slim and I guess 17, though he told me on the car ride that he studied philosophy and history at one of the local universities, so he was probably around 20, not a few years older than 20. Nevertheless, he looked like he was 17. He asked me why I don't drive, and I said it's because I don't have a car or a driver's license. He asked what I did for a living, and I told him that I'm a private detective. I thanked him for picking me up. No problem, he said. The car obviously smelled of flowers. At first, it was pleasant, though as Darren drove, slowly, I started to develop an acute headache. I said to Darren, "Did the flowers ever get to your head?" "Yeah," he said, "all the time. Crack your window." I opened my window slightly so as not to damage the flowers. "You have a headache?" said Darren. "Yeah," I said, "though I'm also hungover." Darren drove fast and told me a story about a philosopher, one from a small mountain village, 100-odd years ago, who leaves his cottage and goes into town so as to get some flour, sugar, eggs, milk, and meat, if there is meat, from a store that a friend of his, a philosopher too, runs from home. The two philosophers meet. Philosopher A, the one who leaves his cottage to go get supplies, and Philosopher B, the one who runs a small shop out of his home, and talk for hours about politics, science, art, and love, and drink mugs of some sort of mead. Philosopher A is convinced, Darren told me as he drove, that love as such, that love qua love, is nothing more than misfiring spirit. Spirit clouding one's senses, confusing one and leading one astray. That is to say, blinding one as a prisoner. But Philosopher B says, spirit's what clouds your so-called senses, for it's what grants you the ability to imagine love in the first place. Love, too, can confine, he says. Yes, true. But so-called spirit, the fantasy of spirit, this is necessary to possess the illusion, to be able to even have illusions. To generate more illusions, one need be inhabited ab initio with so-called spirit, says Philosopher B to Philosopher A. I know, says Philosopher A. That's why I think love's a lie. If spirit's present in the beginning, as a sort of initial state, then once illusions are acquired, begetting more and more illusions, in time, some of the illusions, ones based on non-truths, of course, transmogrify mutatis mutandis into exalted love. If this exalted love's born from lies, lies generated by spirit, then, eo ipso, he says, love's a lie. Although love may be a lie, as you yourself say, says Philosopher B to Philosopher A, it does bring to light some certainties on occasion. For example, says Philosopher A? Well, for example, after loving, well loving even, from time to time, we can be sure that we are really separate. That some sort of commingling, even temporarily, a commingling of spirit never becomes one. We are always separated, says Philosopher B to Philosopher A, who responds by saying, "You're probably right." Then Philosopher A tells Philosopher B about a young man in his late 20s, who is visited one night by the devil. The devil comes to the young man. He comes to him on a street corner and says to the young man as he's walking, "There are things you'll never know, as I'm sure you already know, things beyond your comprehension, and there are things you do know, things you have no idea you know, and it's impossible for you to free yourself of this knowledge, although this knowledge is beyond your comprehension too." And then the devil laughs, says Philosopher A to Philosopher B. Said Darren while driving me and the bouquet to a lanes. I asked Darren what the young man said in response. He said nothing, Darren said. I asked Darren what Philosopher B said to Philosopher A after the story, and Darren said, he said, that although it's important to recognize the bottomless pit in others, it's also important not to be dragged into that hole, and that although we're all separate and alone, it is in fact possible to drag someone into a pit. I tipped him the few dollars I had in change. He said thanks and gave me his card, and I took my bouquet, and he drove off in his flower-filled hatchback. Yeah.